Hey everyone, it's Kristen. So, for years I've been saying that I should do a Follow the Mutant storyline or video series because it's set in Texas. But obviously I haven't done it yet. But with the X-Men 97 series bringing in the Adversary, I felt like, well, now's the time to do it. Oh, I couldn't find my Storm shirt, but I have my Shadowcat and Lockheed shirt. And then I wore my Storm earrings again because I just really like them. They're fun. My friend made them for me. Um, so this is definitely going to be a two-part video series at least. I'm going to try not to make it much longer than two or three. But it covers 11 issues. So it's definitely going to be more than just one. But however many videos it is, I will make sure to release them all before not this coming Wednesday because this one is the next episode's called Remember It, which I feel like it has something to do with Gambit. By the description, it doesn't say, I mean, it doesn't seem like it, but in the original series, Gambit was always saying, the name's Gambit, remember it. So that's why I feel like it has something to do with Gambit. But I guess we'll see. We'll see Wednesday. Um, and then next week is LifeDeath Part 2. So I will definitely release all the videos before then, just in case, you want to watch them and catch up and learn, about that storyline and who the adversary is and Forge's background, which is super interesting. Like, yeah, I mean, like, the first time I read this story, I was like, whoa, that kind of blew me away. I would have never thought of that. Never guessed that. So anyway, we'll get started. So I showed you this issue in Life Death because it's the first introduction to Forge, but it's also the introduction to his mentor, um, whose name is spelled N-A with an inflection over it, Z-E, and I don't know how to pronounce that, so I'm just gonna call him his mentor. And if you know how to pronounce that, please let me know. I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it because it's a Cheyenne name. So yeah, I wasn't sure how to pronounce it. Anyway, so you see a hologram of his mentor running away, you know, chastising Forge basically for foregoing his destiny. And then, so I already did Life Death 186, so we're not going to revisit that. So the one after that is where we see Storm leaving his penthouse. And I marked like the pages so that like I said, I'm trying to condense it, trying to go faster since there's so much information to cover. So, I mean, there's some side plots and side stories in these issues, but we're not going to talk about those. We're just going to talk about the things that are pertaining to the Fall of Mutants. So, Storm is attacked outside of Forge's penthouse building by a dire wraith, and she's saved by his mentor, which will become important later on. And he says, I'm a shaman like in Cheyenne like Forge, and I had a dream that he was in terrible danger. We must like save him. He's basically the last hope that our people, the Cheyenne and your people, the world have. We have to save him. And so they call him and he answers, but he cries out because, the dire wraiths have found him. So they go to save him. And this is just a nod to Storm. When she still had her powers, Wolverine taught her how to shoot, just in case she ever may need, to know. And Forge's mentor is like, so you know Forge? And she's like, yeah, and yet you don't like him. Yeah. She's like, I have my reasons. And basically, she's going to save him because she says, no one will harm him until, like, I, reclaim my vengeance. So again, Forge's mentor saves Storm. So that's twice that he saved her life. They find Forge. And she's like, I promised, I promised your mentor I would save you. That's the only reason I'm here. Like, no other reason. Like I said, I'm trying to skip through because we have a lot to cover. So Forge's mentor goes up to his sanctum sanctorum. Does that sound familiar? I mean, who would have thought that Forge had a sanctum sanctorum like Doctor Strange? So this is like the source of his power, like his nexus. So, you know, his mentor can feel how much power he has, and he says he's a fool for denying, his power, denying his heritage. So, Forge creates holograms of Rom the Space Knight and his partner Starshine, who are the Wraith's like deadliest enemies, to confuse them. And so in their confusion, they are able to strike them and destroy them. Oh, and the X-Men, they come to the rescue because they sensed that they were needed. And, of course, the X-Men always come to the rescue. So, but of course, they don't see what's behind them. Oh, and the interesting thing about this is Rogue made a couple of her first appearances in Rom. I think it was like 31, 32. Like, I don't have those issues. I wish I did, because that'd be really cool. But I don't. Okay, so that's done for that one. Like I said, I'm trying to go fast so that, so that we can get through all these, so that you get the basis of the idea. Okay, so now we move on to the next issue, 188. Like I said, I'm skipping things that don't pertain to this. Okay, so this is important because this is the first appearance of the Adversary. So remember, Forge's mentor went up to his Sanctum Sanctorum, which is also called an Eyrie, because Forge is known as an eagle, as the eagle, and an Eyrie is a large nest of a bird of prey, usually an eagle, like atop high, usually a cliff, atop high in a tree or a cliff, but usually a cliff. Anyway, so he calls upon the Great Spirit to save them, save his people, and he's like, I offer you the world and everything in it if you'll, save us, basically just the Cheyenne people. And the Great Spirit doesn't hear him, but the Adversary does. And he laughs at him and says, like, why would you offer me something I already have? And so basically he takes over Forge's mentor's form. He possesses him. And he also says, we've fought before, and you're familiar to me, and yet now your soul is alien. So you know what that means. He was taken over by a dire wraith before, like even before this point. So this is the first appearance of the Adversary. So he chooses basically to appear in Forge's mentor's form. So, like I said, the X-Men came to the rescue. Ileana, Colossus's little sister, brought them, and she first gained her powers back in X-Men, Uncanny X-Men 160. I'm pretty sure I did a video about that, and because she spent 7 years in limbo, and so Forge finds his mentor, and he's weak and exhausted. He's hurt. He needs to go to the hospital. And Forge is like, I have to take him to the hospital. And Storm's like, okay, I won't be here when you get back. And he's like, no, I can't let this end this way. And he's like, she pulls a gun on him and says, you don't have a lot of choice, but, don't worry. We'll see each other again. Our story's not finished. Oh, and then this is just like a brief, teeny little side note because I thought this was funny. So Nightcrawler's feeling disheartened from, beating the X-Men. Like, what's the point? And Storm says, what's that classic, she calls it classic saying that you're so fond of? With great power comes great responsibility. And so her quoting that to him made him change his mind. So let's see. There you go. Now you can see it. Anyway, I just thought that was funny that the X-Men are quoting a Spider-Man quote. Okay, So now we jump ahead to Uncanny X-Men 220. And Storm on the front is saying, Forge, you coward, show your face. I want my powers back now. So it's pretty dramatic cover. And so Storm, that Wolverine's trying to leave the X-Men. Everyone's trying to leave the X-Men all of a sudden. um, and he says, and she convinces him to stay, that the X-Men need him. And she decides she's going to humble herself, beg if she has to get Forge to restore her powers because she knows she's more valuable to the team with her powers. Even though she's awesome without him, I mean, she, beat Cyclops for control of the X-Men or for leadership of the X-Men, which was a really cool moment. And, she can hold her own without powers, but, of course, being an Omega level mutant, her powers are really, really impressive. So Storm goes back to Forge's penthouse and finds it empty. And this is the first time she's been to the penthouse since Uncanny X-Men 188. So the Adversary, he senses that Storm's back, and he's like, "Oh, let me go welcome her," because he's been in Forge's, Airy, his sanctum sanctorum this whole time, just kind of basically waiting. And so Storm goes through the penthouse, and she basically sees holograms of what happened in LifeDeath, Uncanny X-Men 186. So we won't go into that since I've already done that issue. And then she finally she shuts off the holograms and she finally finds Forge. And he basically has been there this whole time just watching the holograms, like plugged up to all these machines. And then she realizes, though, he is also a hologram. And the Adversary, in disguise as Forge's mentor, he says, I've been here for weeks looking for Forge. And she's like, you've been here for weeks? How come you didn't, you were here? How come you didn't warn me about the holograms, about, the weapon system, the defenses being active? He's like, I wanted to see if you still had your edge. She's just, of course that makes her mad. And he's like, we need to save Forge. You saw what he has become. You saw what happened to him. That's because of you. And she's like, well, he betrayed me. And he's like, then what are you doing here? And she said, unfinished business that is now complete. And he says, like blazes, which I feel like that is the cuss, when you want to cuss in comics, like back in the, in the 80s, I feel like that's the cuss word because they couldn't cuss in here. So basically, he argues with her and says, you know, Forge is now under the control of the Adversary. This he's he says, don't you realize how important Forge is? He's been trained since birth to, combat the Adversary, who's this like evil, cruel being who thrives on chaos. And Forge is the only one that can defeat him. We have to find him. We have to find him. And she's like, I have other responsibilities. Like I can't do that. And he's like, I've saved your life. He did twice in Uncanny X-Men 187. So he's like, I'm calling in that debt. And he's like, I'm begging you. A great battle is being waged for his soul. Like we have to find him. We have to save him. And so she finally agrees. Like she finally relents and get used to seeing this face, this creepy smiling face in the shadow thing, because that happens a lot. So he got his way. Storm's joining him. all this is to his purpose. So now we jump to Uncanny X-Men 223. So we're actually making pretty good time. So that's good. Like I said, I just marked pages that were relevant and try to condense it as much as possible. So we are in the headquarters of Freedom Force, which is basically a government-sponsored team made up of mostly criminals, led by Mystique, and the government liaison to that is Val Cooper. We talked about this during too, because all part of that team until she left. And basically, Destiny is saying, the one immune who's blind but can see the future, she's saying, the X-Men are going to die. And I threw this in here because we just finished Inferno, and this is talking about Madelyn Pyror. She's basically reflecting on her life, how she and Scott met, got married, have a son, and yet he just left her all of a sudden one day, for no reason. And she's been trying to reach out to him after he left. She's never gotten a hold of him, never found him again. Like, she doesn't know what's going on, why he left, where he is. Even, she left him and the baby. And she, even after, recently, Sinister sent the Marauders to kidnap Nathan. And so she sent, called him to tell him that your son's been kidnapped. We can't find him. I don't know where he is. And he didn't even respond to that. Like, he wouldn't even get back to her about that. And when she woke up in the hospital from her coma, she realized that she's basically essentially been erased. Like, there's nothing that proves that she is who she is, that she had a baby, anything. So she's like, did Cyclops even love me? Like, did our marriage vows mean nothing? So Havoc sees her at the top of the cliff and he thinks she's going to jump. So Storm goes with Forge's mentor, who's disguised as the Adversary, who the Adversary is disguised as, to the Rockies, because he thinks that's where Forge will be. So he points her in the direction, and he says he can't go because he's hurt and weak, and she'll have to go by herself. So she goes and faces all these monsters and trials, and finally finds Forge. And he's like, I am the maker. I'm going to remake this world, as I see fit. Want to join me? And she says, never. And she stabs him. Because the Adversary convinced her that Forge is evil, is gone crazy, is that he's possessed by the Adversary, and that she has no choice, but she has to, neutralize him so that the end of the world doesn't come. So she ends up back in the little shack that they're in, and she's like, I don't understand. And he says, it was a dream. It was a test. You passed. And she's like, I love him so much, but, he's now evil. He's, mad. So I know what I must do. And again, creepy grin. Like I said, that's going to happen a lot because that's what he does. That's how you know he's evil. Okay, and then just to touch on Maddie again. So she's talking to Havoc and said, I loved your brother Scott. I loved your brother Scott, and yet, he betrayed me. He wasn't there for me when I needed him. Like, I will never let myself feel that vulnerable again. And he says, Maddie, the X-Men are a family. Like, we're strong because we stand together. We'll be here for you. Like I said, I just want to add that in there just because, we just saw the Inferno X-Men of X-Men 97, and I thought that was just a good nod to some of the struggles that she went through. Like, she, at this point, still doesn't even know she's a clone. She doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know that Scott left her for Jean. She discovers, it later on TV when she sees X Factor on TV, and there's Scott standing next to a woman that looks just like her, basically Jean. So, okay. So now we move on to Uncanny X-Men 224. Like I said, this is mostly a long shot story, as you can see, like a different X-Men story. But we're just going to skip those parts. We're just going to concentrate on, like I said, on the parts that pertain to the Adversary. So first opens on this, and I think this is a cool outfit for Storm. I think this would make a cool like a custom action figure. But I also wonder, I mean, she got this garment and this outfit from a Native American, or at least a Native American spirit posing as a Native American shaman. So for her to wear this, like, does that count as cultural appropriation? Like, would people be upset about that? So here he's telling Storm more about the Adversary, that he's, a trickster and that he means to end the world. And what he wants to do is take all the life energy for himself. And doing that, destroys the world. And he wants to, remake the world and, however he sees fit. And he says that Forge still loves Storm, so he'll hesitate. And she says, but I won't. Like, in that moment, I will slay him. And this, ew. So he kisses her for good luck and to, remember him by, which I'm like, okay. Again, the creepy grin off into the distance. Okay. So basically, the next issue starts the Fall of Mutants. So the main story is in Uncanny X-Men, and then X Factor and the New Mutants have like little like side stories, which we're not going to do those because the main focus is Uncanny X-Men. They're in different parts of the world dealing with the fallout of what the Adversary is doing. So again, Storm climbs to the top of Forge's tower in order to defeat him, and the not Forge's mentor says he can't go with her because all the defenses are keyed to him, and so therefore, and he knows he's coming, so he would be no help to her. So she has to do this basically all by herself. So she fights her way with just a knife through demons to get to the top. And when she finally does, I mean, there's like, hordes of demons. She finally does, and she sees Forge, and she doesn't hesitate, and she stabs him. And she says, I can't let you open that portal because opening that portal will end the world. And he says, I wasn't trying to open it, I was trying to close it. And then you see this moment of panic, like, flash in her eyes. And so, of course, the Adversary is super happy because Storm did exactly what he wanted her to do. He sends them away up into the sky to a different place, and he destroys Forge's tower. So he has no more power. And then, of course, creepy grin again. So he has no more power in this world. So, okay, we made pretty good time. So the next issues are the bulk of what the Fall of the Mutants are about. So that was kind of just the backstory leading up to it. So I'm gonna, cut this this video off right here. That way, if you don't really care to know the backstory or the things leading up to the Fall of the Mutants, then you don't have to watch this video. So, okay. So join me next time for the start of the Fall of the Mutants event. So until next time, bye.